Welcome in, psychology students. So next we're going to cover different types of circadian rhythms. In other words, how circadian rhythms are different in people and how they change developmentally. Just to kind of review a little bit, so our circadian rhythm is our sleep-wake cycle, which lasts about a day for most people. Keep in mind that this can be changed through things like genetics. We know that genetic mutations, for example, can alter the length of your circadian rhythm. Our average is about 24.2 hours, or about a day, but we have some cases of people having a 16-hour circadian rhythm. In other words, it's less than a day, which is kind of bizarre. And then on the other extreme, we have some cases where the circadian rhythm could be 50 hours. In other words, it would take 2 full days, basically, to cycle through one of their rhythms. So thus, we find some differences among people, but remember, our average is about 24.2 hours, or about a day. Keep in mind that the length of your circadian rhythm is developmentally determined. So for example, as we look at the diagram here, a newborn's circadian rhythm is only a few hours. So notice that our typical brand new baby would go through several of these throughout the day and night, and that explains why they are constantly waking up and going to sleep, even in the middle of the night. So as a parent, we all have to deal with those kind of things. All right, we get a little bit older, we hit about 1, and now our cycle starts to lengthen. So notice that our typical infant would need a couple naps during the day. That continues to lengthen until about our teen years, where it actually expands beyond 1 full day. So this may explain why teenagers love to sleep in, why it's hard for them to kind of warm up in the morning. And we think it's because their circadian rhythm has surpassed 24 hours. In fact, some school districts are implementing programs to start the school day a little bit later, because if you think back to high school, first period was usually pretty rough. I remember in first period I had algebra, and it was hard to focus that early in the morning. So the research is kind of showing that maybe we should give them a couple more hours, maybe start the day at like 9 or 10, excuse me, to get their brain warmed up. In other words, to sort of account for that lengthening circadian rhythm. When we become adults, it does approach about a 24-hour cycle here. So thus it sort of stabilizes at that point, and then we'll possibly continue to change as we get older, and we'll kind of cover that in just a minute. All right, so the point is, once again, to wrap that up, developmentally, we see that the length of the circadian rhythm is, it changes over time. Psychologists can typically describe people as what we call morning and evening. In other words, circadian rhythms affect people differently. Some people can be described as a morning person, which means they love to wake up early, even on the weekend, by the way, and they're very sharp early on and get their best work done before noon. Where evening people, as the name implies, means that it takes them a little bit longer to warm up in the evening, or in the morning, excuse me, and they hit their peak a little bit later in the day and thus love to stay up later at night. So the point is that psychologists can classify people into these categories, or even a combination of those two. So we do see that everyone's a little bit different. What the studies are showing is that there are age effects involved. For example, younger people, meaning younger adults, typically are described as being either an evening person or what we call a neutral person, which is sort of in between the morning and the evening. Where older adults, in this case saying over 65, tend to be more morning people. So even though people have these natural inclinations of what their circadian rhythm basically is, we do see age effects where younger people tend to be more the evening side and older people tend to be more morning people. Regardless of those factors, why are you a morning person naturally? Why are you an evening person? We've discovered that the connection between this experience of the circadian rhythm has to do with the actual length of your circadian rhythm. For example, if you're naturally a morning person, remember you're sharper earlier in the day, you love to wake up early, even on your day off, for example, which is kind of frustrating. What we're saying is that on average, you have a shorter circadian rhythm. In this particular case, we are saying it's probably a little bit less than 24 hours. In other words, it would take less time to complete that cycle, and that would explain why you wake up earlier in the morning. If you're more of an evening person, what we are saying here is that your circadian rhythm is longer. In other words, possibly over 24 hours. In other words, it would take longer to complete your cycle. Remember, the sun resets this every day, but this would explain why it takes them longer to warm up in the morning, because they have not completely completed their cycle. So we have made this connection between the actual length of the circadian rhythm and these types of experiences. All right, so this concludes our short lecture on circadian rhythm effects. Please progress to the next step.